What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie298 coming at you live once again through the power of the internet. And I know this is kind of old news. This happened, I think, last Friday. Probably should have made a video about it then, but I still want to talk about it now. There is a developer who worked on Google Stadia. Originally, he said that he was the lead creator on Google Stadia. It turned out not to be true. He had to distance himself from that. But anyway, he had a very controversial opinion saying that creators who live stream video games should have to pay an additional licensing fee in order to stream that media. He was comparing it to music, and I think there's a lot of things wrong with that, but I do want to break it down on both sides. I want to look at how, in some ways, he's technically correct, and then show you why spiritually he's very wrong. So first off, let's let the man speak for himself. Here's what he actually said on Twitter. He said that streamers worried about getting their content pulled because they used music they didn't pay for should be more worried by the fact that they're streaming games they didn't pay for as well. It's all gone as soon as publishers decide to enforce it. And then he followed that up with, the real truth is the streamers should be paying the developers and publishers of the games they stream. They should be buying a license like any real business and paying for the content they use. Now, in some ways, he's technically correct here. Within the YouTube ecosystem, if I were to develop a video game, and I, like Nintendo in the past, or like other creators in the past, decided that I wanted to enforce copyright here on YouTube, YouTube would not stand in the way of that. They're going to facilitate that for me. They're going to allow me to take those videos down, and they're going to make me and that creator decide in a court of law what we want to do. EA absolutely has the option of suppressing and suing for and DMCAing and copyright flagging any video game gameplay of a game they play. That's never really been decided in court as of right now, but that's how it's been played out here on YouTube. YouTube gives those tools to developers and publishers, and Twitch is probably the same way. And way back in the day, this is how YouTube used to work. The people who were originally uploading gameplay to YouTube, YouTube would not protect them in any way. They would not monetize those videos in any way. And that gave rise to the whole MCN, multi-channel network thing. If you remember back when that was a thing, those companies some of them were formed just to protect gaming YouTubers like the angry video game nerds so that YouTube wouldn't get sued by gaming developers if they ever decided to pull off that bandage and start suing and oppressing gaming content. And at the end of the day, YouTube just doesn't like to get sued. They've been sued by Viacom. They were not willing to run the risk of getting sued by gaming publishers and developers. Way back in 2007, Viacom filed a suit for $1 billion against Google. It took them forever to finally get it resolved. They were not willing to run the risk of some companies like EA and Ubisoft coming after them. So once gaming YouTubers knew that they were safe, they started making a lot more gaming content, and publishers started noticing that when a gaming content creator on YouTube or a live streamer elsewhere would stream their games, they would notice increased sales. And this happened a lot with my mentor, Total Biscuit. Whenever he would develop a video about a smaller indie game, those games could blow up overnight. He is responsible for some of the best indie games that you've ever played actually being on your radar, and basically made some of these companies a household name because he made a YouTube video about them back in the day. By the time the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One was out, we were in full co-working mode where game publishers and developers and console manufacturers, everyone except Nintendo, but that's an exceptional case, was on board with content creators playing their games, streaming their games, unboxing their devices, and not only were they on board with it, not only were they willing to allow it, but they were actually paying a lot of us in order to do that. They're still doing that today. You might have heard of a game called Raid Shadow Legends, for example. Now, it's not always going to be 100% true that a game is going to do better because people streamed it. If it is a bad game, and the streamer shows it to be a bad game, there's a real chance that people are not going to want to purchase that game. In the small case that is a short story-driven game, some players might decide to just watch somebody stream it rather than play it. But for the most part, if you're interested in playing a game, you're probably going to buy it. I would say most of the time, if I'm interested in the game, I don't want to watch somebody else stream it before I play it, before I buy it, because I don't want spoilers. It's only if I can't afford a game, if I know that's not a game I have the time to play, or it's a game I'm just not interested in owning and playing myself, will I ever watch somebody else play it, and I think that's fairly commonplace. There might have been a time where you decided not to play a game after watching a streamer to do it, but is it because you got enough of the game by watching it, you watched the game in its entirety, or is it because you just decided it wasn't a game that was worth your money for whatever specific reason? I think most of the time it's the latter. And I think this is especially true when it comes to multiplayer games. I mean, there is probably a case to be had about story-driven games, especially the shorter ones, especially the smaller indie ones, but I do not think there's any case to be had when it comes to your Among Us, your Fortnites, your Call of Duties, any of these games where every time you play it, you're going to have a completely unique experience to you. Those games absolutely, I don't think, stand a case here where publishers, if they defended that in court, that a judge is going to rule that it doesn't fit fair use. So at the end of the day, I do believe, and based on the lawyers I've talked to, playing video games and live streaming them does transform it in a way that fits fair use clause, so there's not a legal ground for this guy to be standing on. He compared it to streaming a song, which every time you listen to a song created by another person, it's exactly the same. There's absolutely very few ways to make that transformative unless you're reproducing the song, you're copying the song, you're karaokeing the song, or something along that lines. He compared just streaming that song to playing a video game, and playing that video game is very transformative. It's when we start altering songs that we get into fair use territory. Otherwise, you wouldn't have artists making parodies every day. It just wouldn't work under the ecosystem. Under the current YouTube setup, you can absolutely, as a publisher or a game developer, enforce this if you want to. But it has been shown time and time again, unless you have made a very specific game or you've made a very bad one, it's not going to be in your best interest to suppress it. And in fact, you're more likely as a developer or a publisher to pay content creators to play your game than you would suppress it. Obviously, content creators do not want to have to do anything more than pay for the game in order to stream it. And hey, most of the time we don't have to do that because we get a code. YouTube and Twitch, they don't want that enforced either. The games publishers don't want that enforced either. So it's kind of bizarre that this Hutchinson guy, for whatever reason, wants it to be enforced. I genuinely don't know why he thinks this, because nobody else agrees. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you check this very comment section, you're gonna see some people saying, for whatever reason, I hate that you play video games for a living, you should have to get a real job, you should be miserable like me, and those people do exist, but they are a very vocal minority. If you look at the billions of views of other people playing games, or you talk to a creator, or you talk to a publisher, they definitely do not agree with that guy. We're having the time of our lives over here. You should join us instead of being bitter. And I think it's very telling that even Nintendo, who quite often does not understand the internet, does not understand influencers, and originally was blocking this type of content and these types of streams, has actually gotten on board with creators. And I don't think it's any surprise that the Nintendo Switch has done very well now that it has creator support, and it's obviously much better than the Wii U, but I do think creators have helped it a small percentage. What makes the story so interesting is that Alex Hutchinson originally stated that he was a lead developer at Stadia, but that's not the case. In fact, Google clapped back and made him remove that from his Twitter bio, and they released this statement as well. He said, the recent tweets by Alex Hutchinson, creative director at the Montreal studio of Stadia Games and Entertainment, do not reflect those of Stadia, YouTube, or Google, said the company in a statement to 9 to 5 Google. So yeah, even Google doesn't agree. At the end of the day, I think Jim Sterling got this right. If it were 10 years ago, maybe Alex would have a point, but the genie's out of the bottle, and we're just not going to be able to get it back into that bottle without a tremendous amount of damage and frustration and misery for everyone involved. I don't think gaming developers are ever going to go in that direction. So it's already a done deal. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Alex is technically correct. They could go that way if they wanted to. They're really not going to, and it just shows how out of touch Alex is to believe they would. Now, that's one man's opinion. I could be wrong. I would love it if you left a comment, and while you're down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe if you haven't already, consider becoming a member if you would like here to help support the channel, and remember, as always, thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I'll speak with you again soon.